They couldn't have picked a better name for the thing because now Ashes is all that we are left with. Today we're talking about the biggest MMO in Kickstarter history and its implosion. The founder has resigned, in a very eyebrow-raising way. Staff have been fired, they have got no pay, and the game has been pulled from Steam, where it only launched 2 months ago. And as fans are raging, rightly, at the collapse of a game 8 years in the making that never even reached beta, insiders are telling of a mysterious new owner who killed the company rather than keep spending. Ashes of Creation was kickstarted in 2017. It was a hyper-ambitious MMO from a brand new team, Intrepid Studios, that wanted 750,000 USD and ended up raising 3.2 million, making it the most funded MMO on the platform at the time. As we all know, Kickstarter MMOs have really by now got a hell of a track record. Now, it was also that Steven Sharif, the game's founder and creative director, could build the dynamic, faction-driven MMO that he had always dreamt of. And throughout development, his public position was clear. And this is what's getting them into hot water. The game was self-funded. There were no investors. There would be no board to answer to. That's going to make a message we'll talk about soon seem a little bit funny. Now, what followed was 8 years of, I think, what we can only call messiness. A battle royale was launched in 2018, ostensibly to test mechanics, and then it was shut down by 2020. Now, the alpha continued from 2021 onward, with premium backers getting hands-on access. And when I say premium backers, in some cases, I really do mean the premium, though I don't think the Ashes people have quite outdone the whales of Star Citizen. But then, in December 2025, Ashes of Creation was released on Steam in early access. It was still an alpha, and it was in a state that many users found unacceptable for a paid product. Reviews were mixed, and signs that this release hadn't gone well internally were already beginning to show. And it's the sort of thing where there are a lot of cool bones in the game, and once people would get to endgame, be able to do, say, the stuff with the boats. And I guess where a lot of the Arc Age inspirations came from, that's another MMO with a pretty disastrous history, sadly. There was a lot of cool stuff. However, leveling up was essentially just a humongous mob grind. The quest content wasn't really there, just a whole bunch of issues. And for a lot of people, while there were a lot of systems there, it seemed perplexing that it was so light in content for such a long development cycle. Now, I talked about signs not really being good. Well, 9 people were laid off from a team of 250 in late January. Okay, that's sucks for those people, but it's only 9 out of 250. Now, when this happened, Sharif posted, quote, "Development on Ashes is continuing forward." However, by the 29th of January, just a few days later, and all as players continued to worry, Intrepid released a statement trying to soothe people's concerns. "We remain deeply committed to making Ashes of Creation, a world worthy of your time, your stories, and your belief." That's a nice statement, but within a few days, well, it appeared that the entire development team would be laid off. And this is where things get honestly insane. I'll be real, if you don't want to code or you don't like games, skip this. But if you're still here, then that's good, because it means today's sponsor, Boot.dev, was built specifically for how us gamers actually learn, and that's actually more relevant than ever. Now, Boot teaches back-end development. That's the kind of thing that lands you 100k plus jobs, and they do it through a proper 12-month program structured like an RPG. Leaderboards, achievements, a Discord that actually helps. Over 750,000 students who have completed 33.7 million lessons, which is wild. And that's covering tech like Python, TypeScript, and Go, all from the fundamentals up. There's projects, there's modules, and the likes of actually using Git properly. It is fantastic. Now, my perspective in this is I did a BEng computer science, focused more on C++ and C#, kind of game engine-y stuff. Completely different world to web dev, which is why I also need Boot. And their teaching approach, I can say, is incalculably better than the way it was done at university. And here's the thing. The AI tools are everywhere now, your cursors, your Claude codes, but they're only as good as the person who's using them. Boot teaches you the fundamentals that separate serious engineers from vibe coders who just ship security nightmares. Really, they do. And their new training grounds feature even generates personalized problems based on what has challenged you when you've been using Boot, all with spaced repetition baked in. It's seriously gigabrain, and you can get 25% off your first purchase at boot.dev/Bellular News. You'll save the most using the annual sub, and of course, if you're not happy, they'll refund you on the spot. As first reported by PC Games N, the first sign came from the Director of Communications, Margaret Crone, who took to LinkedIn to announce that she was no longer at Intrepid. Now, she implied she wasn't the only one. She cited layoffs, so multiple. But then, Stephen Sharif followed with a statement on the Ashes of Creation Discord. However, this was a statement personally made by him, not a professional statement. In it, he alleged that he had lost control of the company. Quote, "The board began directing actions that I could not ethically agree with or carry out." He says that he quit and that most of the senior leadership team followed him in quitting. In his words, everyone acted in good faith, but the board were issuing warn notices and proceeding with a mass layoff. LinkedIn posts from staff would follow, confirming what everybody feared. Basically, yeah, everyone was gone and they had been told that they were done. Now, Stephen Sharif's post places him as the defender of this game, of the developers and of the players against a faceless board. But there's a lot to unpack with that, because how true is it? So there are things worth interrogating here. First, Intrepid's Warren report, which basically is stuff you file with the authorities whenever there's going to be big job losses, that was filed January 31st, and it was listed as a permanent closure affecting 123 remaining staff. However, there are other corporate filings, and they tell a rather more mundane story. So let me walk you through them. The most recent company documents are from December 30th, 2025. They're a delay in the annual report until 2027. And we see no board, no owners being listed here, just Stephen Sharif as the sole director and John Moore as the CFO, which is perfectly normal for this type of filing. But some in the community see this a little differently, shall we say, essentially reading it as evidence that Sharif is lying, and this is building on distrust that has been present since the game's announcement. Number one, for, being a crowdfunded MMO, but in this case, a bit more specifically, when he was linked to multi-level marketing schemes. Yes, MLMs, and ones that seem to reappear in Ashes of Creation's Kickstarter referral structure. Now, a purportedly leaked email to staff fills in a few gaps in this story. The company's finances are seemingly so bad that they can't pay staff for this month. This is something that's later been corroborated by Crone, who I mentioned earlier, who confirmed that the entire company had been let go. Now, the email suggests that plans aren't fully decided, but some of the 250 developers could stay to work on the game. Now, in light of that, the Steam launch does take on a more desperate tone, right? They needed money. Release the game on Steam, acquire money. Just that it maybe didn't go that well. But here's the thing. There are a lot of missing pieces. What about that board? You see, right now there's a board that doesn't actually appear in company documents. There's layoffs that both have and have not happened, and a pivot that seems to have came days after developers promised that they could turn things around. When you piece together all the things that have came out and that various people have said thus far in the story, it doesn't add up. And that's where we're lucky, because insiders have spoken out. Reports from both YouTuber Kira and MMORPG.com have corroborated at least some of what seems to have happened behind the scenes. Kira doesn't claim to have all the facts, but says that his sources have been accurate before, and the allegations made here are very significant. So, in his version of events, an unnamed private equity group took over ownership of Intrepid Studios on Ashes of Creation. Then, on the 29th of January, Kira received a message confirming this. Sharif's resignation happened as he described, and most of the senior leadership followed him out the door. And the reason, well, plans to move production of the game offshore and outsource development, keeping under 100 of their 250 staff. This private equity group are the board that Sharif blamed, and after these resignations, their plans changed within the day. Because without leadership, the owners simply decided to just file for mass layoffs. And there's no money for severance, PTO that people are owed, overtime, any of that. And obviously there's not going to be money for that when the salaries aren't being paid. So that's quite the story. Now, MMORPG.com sources do corroborate much of this. The numbers aren't exactly the same. They frame it as a skeleton crew originally staying to work in the game before basically that plan was abandoned in favor of a full layoff. They also confirmed that staff aren't being paid whatsoever. Now, other elements do remain unexplained, such as the identity of this board, how the company ended up under different ownership than Sharif, and a few other things. So it's all quite weird. Now, none of this is contradicted by publicly available information, at least of the time of this video's recording. Here's the thing. It is not unusual for a private equity firm to come in, buy something, and then immediately kill it. But if the new owners can offload debt onto a failing entity and then just hang on to the assets, that can actually work better for them than trying to make a game with no creative leads. Now, to be clear, that's what we call a theory, and it's the sort of thing that does happen with private equity firms. But I do think it's a theory that carries some weight given everything else that we've been seeing. Online, we're seeing community members combing through every public filing that they can find. I mean, come on, it's the gaming community. If there is, I don't know, a photo of Shia LaBeouf having a mental breakdown that makes its way onto 4chan, people will find out where Shia planted the flag by looking at the cloud patterns. That's a real story, by the way, but it is to say the internet is damn good at finding things. And by things, I mean UCC liens, tax records, corporate documents, anything that might explain what the hell happened. And what they've found so far paints a picture of a company deeply in trouble. An $850,000 case for unpaid cloud services from December 2025, and then insurance debts from June 2025. To those who already doubted whether Ashes of Creation was legitimate, this just ended up being more evidence that the whole thing was a precarious house of cards. Now obviously, there's the question of, is it a scam? I'm going to talk about that a bit later. But as of right now, there is no hard evidence of wrongdoing. But I said hard there. There's no hard evidence. There certainly seems to be evidence of poor financial management, but on there being no hard evidence of wrongdoing, well, there's one man who wants to change that, and his name is Stephen Sharif. I have made a public statement. My next action will be a public filing. I hope that at that point, people have a better understanding of what happened. That's a follow-up message from Stephen Sharif that seems to confirm that he wants to take this to court. Now, he's advised players to be patient, to avoid jumping to conclusions, and to wait for legal filings to tell the story. Obviously, though, people don't really want to wait. The Steam reviews for the game have tanked. Of course, that's a little bit immaterial because the game has now been pulled from sale. And those who bought it only 2 months ago are pushing Valve for refunds. Some people are getting those refunds, but that actually raises a thornier question for Kickstarter backers. Intrepid committed to a lofty promise, and it's a promise that goes far beyond Kickstarter's platform obligations. Quote, "And finally, in the case that Ashes of Creation does not launch, we promise to refund all backers in full." So, does Steam count? Ashes of Creation is still an alpha. It never made it to beta, yet it is on Steam, and it does bring up another fun little game. You see, the last crowdfunded MMO to collapse like this was Chronicles of Illyria. Now, it saw backers take it to court and walk away with nothing. Now, some people have speculated here that the Steam launch was a last-ditch effort to avoid legal trouble, but considering the time since that promise, the financial collapse that we're seeing now, and Sharif no longer being involved with the company, who the hell would be paying for those refunds? Company sure as hell can't do it. Like, maybe if that refund promise was like a legally enforceable thing, would that mean that the company now owned by the private equity firm would owe money to those people? I mean, I've seen some people basically say, is this just them trying to dump that obligation onto Valve? Obviously, in a case like that, it would not be correct for Valve to be issuing those refunds. It's not really their bag. All that Valve, I think, should really have to do is just stand by their own refund policy. Obviously, though, that's not going to get players their money back. That sucks. This whole thing sucks. And certainly, in a void of information, anger and conspiracy are rife. And I don't say that to, tut-tut at people. Absolutely not. People deserve answers. Right now, the community's just trying to find any shred of information they can get. As things stand, Ashes of Creation's social channels, the Discord, Reddit, etc., are ablaze with rage. A huge number of people feel scammed, they feel hurt, and they don't understand how this could have changed so quickly. To them, the fact they didn't know this was coming is really all the evidence that they need. It's evidence that the long-term critics were right, that this all was in fact a scam, that they were wrong to believe in a game that was a dream for many. What I'd say there is, scam is one of those words that's lost a lot of its meaning. Now those MLM things I mentioned earlier, yeah, could be some scamminess going on there. But generally speaking, a scam is, me telling you, hey, I'll sell you this iPhone, and then, I give you something that looks like an iPhone, but it's actually a knockoff. Like, that is an overt scam. This does, however, feel scammy. You may have heard the phrase, don't attribute to malice what can be, easily explained by stupidity. When I look at some of those claims, like the cloud services bill, it seems that there was quite a degree of financial mismanagement here. Even thinking about the scale of this game's development team, it seems kind of huge for what I thought was supposed to be a very much sandbox-driven MMO that wouldn't rely and wouldn't really need a big content team. And to be honest with you, the Ashes of Creation that existed in my mind was way smaller than the one that they tried to release. That might sound a little strange, but you may have heard of the phrase scope creep. I did not think the game would be trying to bite off just so much, so whenever I watched, say, the Skill Up review of the early access release, I was kind of perplexed. So it at least appears to me that they tried to do something way too big, something well beyond their means. And perhaps it could be the case that they thought being able to get multiple thousands from some people for, the backer pledges, maybe they thought, we can just run this just like Star Citizen. We can just continually sell people ships and somehow have this big, money number that will go up. For me, the biggest question, though, is what the hell is going on with this private equity firm? When did that happen? Because again, this whole idea of a board being involved is a very new and fresh thing, and it's one that goes directly against what Stephen Sharif said, even if it is more likely than not that this is a series of incompetent financial management combined with last-ditch efforts to save a company, maybe by taking on some private equity investment, maybe by trying the Steam thing. At the end of the day, it does feel dishonest, especially when the situation appears to be materially much worse than was presented to players. And some of those players were payers, be that for the early access release in Steam, or be that the very large quantities of money that people backed this game for. And in that original post on the 29th, whoever was left at Intrepid said they would host a stream on February 13th to showcase what was next. Doesn't seem like that's happening, not with there being no staff left, even if the game's servers are still running. But outside the game, I think we are only just starting to see a legal process that will likely take years to resolve, and sadly, the game that people desperately dreamed of is just looking further and further away than ever. Who knows where this is going to go? However, I guess I will say this. Ashes of Creation as an IP has certainly got image problems right now. However, that as an asset does actually exist, and it is now owned by this private equity firm. Maybe there is some future where someone acquires that asset, and maybe from that something could happen. But I would not expect some Hytale style turnaround here. This does appear to be substantially more of a shit show. Let me know what you think. My emails are open. We will follow the story as it develops. And if all this drama has you riled up for some more, go watch this video next. It's about Highguard, but not just the drama. It's about what's actually going on with the game and how it at least seems that them not being a AAA team owned by a publisher, well, maybe playing in their favor. Because to be fair to them, they're actually moving fast.